Hello everyone, my name is Batoul Alrashdan. I'm an architect and a designer, a fashion tech designer. I got well known for 3D printing sustainable material on the fabric. That I do it for the couture dresses that goes on Paris Fashion Week, New York, on the runways, Cannes Film Festival, and others. My designs have won several awards, including the recent FashionTech Award, the Taipei Industrial Award, and the Sustainability Award. And now I'm gonna guide you through 3D printing on fabrics. So I'm gonna share my screen. I'm sure you're all, can you all see my screen now? Right. So we're all familiar with how 3D printing is a sustainable approach of designing and how we get to explore this digital catalog before we choose which one to print and and so on. And there are several ways where you can 3D print fashion. Either you print a textile itself with TPU, or you do it like how I'm gonna teach you this way, which is you 3D print PLA or whatever on the fabric directly, and that's its endless possibilities. This was like an exploration of mine of how I can convert crochet, which is the traditional stitch of Jordan, into with computational couture, and this was done with Grasshopper. So I was manipulating the cross stitch in several ways. It's a way of merging culture and tradition with digital fabrication and 3D printing and computational design. As you can see, you get to explore this digital catalog before you choose which one you might like to print. This was the inspiration. As you can see, this is like the traditional clothing, and then you get to 3D print it. These are the shapes. This is like the Grasshopper code that I used to generate the cell, which is the cross stitch, and then I used to manipulate and modify the cell around. This is a really cool one, which is self-forming, which is for the kind of design. I also like tulle is not the only fabric I print on. I print on lycra, organdy, and biomaterials. Um, and here you can see how with the 3D printing on fabric, I manipulate the cross stitch so we can come to the self-forming again, self-forming 3D print again, but it just was a way of 3D printing something that's just few layers, and then once you move it from the bed forms into another geometry, which is more of a 4D. So it's a one way of how we can do stuff. It's really interesting, but maybe I can show it later. And then I want to show this project that was inspired from the crystalline formation of the Dead Sea. So I was exploring different crystalline formation geometries of the salt formation. There's something wrong with the videos. Anyway, Dead Sea is like it has some environmental concerns regarding it, and I was also inspired from the crystalline formation and the goddess. So I want to guide you through how you can transform inspiration and also into digital fabrication. Also the bioluminescence, which is like the animals that emit their own light in the lowest layers of the ocean. And that is the lowest point on earth. So I wanted to translate that with digital fabrication and 3D printing. That's how I firstly started to classify the geometries, which is more or less four categories. So you have the nerves one, the bubbly, the sharp, and then with that, I moved forward to the digital after 3D scanning, after tracing them. I tested some prints alone, and then I went to the digital design of it. And this is more also of the grasshopper design. So you can see here some of the digital crystalline formation explorations that you can 3D print also on the fabric. And then that geometry, you can see how it's later on it got 3D printed on the tulle, and the tulle transformed into a dress that you can see like part of it was 3D printed on the fabric and part was 3D printed alone. And then this is more or less the final result. Also, like you can 3D print accessories, arm bracelets directly on the tool. It's really interesting if you pick a new tool and it go like it appears as if it's coming out of someone's body. I'm not sure if you can see it. I don't know why it's blurry. This is it. So these are more like spikes that are planted directly on the tool fabric. This is how is it on the body once you wear it. Of course, those are design rules and materials, but we're not gonna go in depth into that because I just want to say one thing that when you want to print on the fabric, you just have to design a geometry that you don't need support for, because otherwise you're gonna tear the fabric while removing it. And I'm gonna show you a few of the bags and designs I did while I that were 3D printed on the fabric. These bags were I 3D printed firstly the geometry on the fabric, and then I sewed it with the leather. So it was like 3D printed with sewing, and then you sew it into the pattern of whatever bag you desire. Just like you get to explore different geometries, different forms, and different methodologies of how we can do it. And this was 3D printed on the fabric until they were showcased in Mexico. So there are also different geometries that printed on the fabric, and then you can sew it into a dress. This is more of a line formation that was printed directly on the fabric. And this was a collaboration I did with Tony Ward. It was also 3D printed on the new tulle fabric. And then it was sewed into a dress. And then Kylie Minogue was wearing it for the Billboard shoot. This was also 3D printed on the fabric, but was nude color. So that's why it doesn't look like she's wearing something. But it was more exploration. This is at Cannes Film Festival also. This is from the bridal collection that was 3D printed also on the fabric. More operations. I just want to show you this last bag before we jump in to do the exercise. So this was like a crestline formation geometry that was printed on fabric and then sewed into this bag. For today's class, I wanted to show you something that maybe you can just print the pattern without sewing. Just so you get to experience it and to try it out, because otherwise you have to do it just like I did here or here. So I just want to make sure, did everyone download Rhino? Are we ready to start designing something? Or maybe yes. Okay. Did you get the workshop guideline, which can more or less guide you through it? I'll guide you through it fast before we start designing it. So for today's exercise, we wanted to do a bag, but we don't want to sew it, right? And we want to 3D print it on the fabric. So like Rhino check, you have it and you have the slicer for sure. First, we're gonna design it on the Rhino, and then we'll guide you how you can slice it. And then we're gonna like the idea is like you print the first layer, you put the fabric with the clips or magnet, and then you resume the print and you continue printing. This is how more or less it's gonna look like. So you can see on here, you just print some sort of a flat pattern, and you print it, you pose the printer, you put the fabric, and you continue the print. And then once you continue the print, after you finish the print, then you remove it from the bed and you can fold it into more or less a back or a clutch. So these are the two designs. I've tried it out. I've sent this file to you for whoever can follow up. So I'm gonna repeat this design. So even if you don't have the file, for those who are not so familiar with the Rhino software, it's actually it's my favorite software that I usually use to design. And here you can open the files, you can save it from here, just very cliche to do so. And then you have here like direct access to certain commands. And the command bar is so interesting. So whatever you want to do, for example, I want to move I want to copy or whatever, I just type it in here and just press enter. And then I select whatever I want to move. It tells me select object you want to move. Press enter once you're done. Also, here I have my some of the tools. For example, to draw a line, I just press on this, press wherever, and then you can turn on the ortho for straight design or straight lines like this. Or you can turn it off and then you're free to do whatever angle you want. And then we have the curves over here. The curves are more or less for some of the biomimicry shapes you want to do. And then we have the cliche circles that you get to pick also whatever data you have. For example, you want a center and a radius circle, a diameter kind of circle, 3-point circle. So for this, you press the center and then you specify the radius, for example, like 10 millimeter, and then enter, you have it. Or if you have a diameter, you just press for the starting point and then you enter your diameter. For example, I want it 20. And then you press enter. And then here it says you in the command, you're never lost because it says in the command line, what's the next procedure, which is like to end a diameter. And you press the end point. And so on for the 3 points. You just specify 3 points. This is the second point. And here it tells you in the command the third point. You just specify the third point. And same goes for the other commands. This is useful, the rectangle, which is all familiar with. Also, you can pick how you would like to draw it. I usually just go from corner to corner. So I specify my first corner, for example, here, and then I specify the length and the width of it. For example, 100 millimeter, enter, and then I specify the width, which is here. It tells me the line, the width anyway, so you're never lost. And for example, I want a 60 millimeter, and I press enter. Another cool thing here, you can find the hexagons if you want. That's cool for the patterns inside. If you want to do the hexagons, it tells you to specify the other corner of the hexagon, and then you have it. But then you can specify other kind of like parameters over here, because also like, okay, you pressed, it tells you in the command line how many number of sides you want. For example, I want 8, I don't want 5. So it's a polygon, but not exactly. And tells me about the edge and every other parameters I should worry about. Example here, and then I can press enter to repeat the same command again. And then for the number of sides this time, I'll pick 5. And to repeat the same command, enter. For example, this time I can do 6 sides, enter. I modify the side from here. And then there you have it. Sometimes we draw these, sometimes you can directly draw a surface from here, which we all know we need the surface to actually extrude it to 3D print it. The surface, you can directly draw a surface like this, and then you have several sides, whatever shape, square, or let's say not square, just a polygon, and then you have a surface directly. Or you have this unique shape, for example, and you don't want to start by drawing the surface. You just have your curves, you have a certain design in mind. You just start with the curve, and then you have this closed curve. You can see here Rhino tells you it's a closed curve. And then you take this curve and you say to Rhino surface from plane of surface from plane curves. It gives you a surface out of whatever you drew. And this is basically what I did over here while having this bag. I drew this with curves, and then I told Rhino to make a surface out of this. So since everyone has this fly right now, I'm just gonna guide you through the concept of making it, where like you can always have varying shape, varying sizes, depends on the printer size of the printer you have. You can go bigger, smaller, modify it. But first you just need, let's say a place where the handle is. And then you just leave a space 1 millimeter, because this space is actually where it's gonna fold, because where you're printing and printing on fabric gives us the flexibility of folding something. So this is where we're gonna bend the stuff. And then we have this 1 meter, 1 milli. You can see here the offset. So basically what I did, I picked the side of this rectangle. You can, when you draw it just with curves, then you have a side, like you have this curve, for example, like this curve, and you press offset, and you tell Rhino on the command line, distance I want 1 millimeter, and you pick the side for the offset. I picked up this side, and then I continue drawing, which this is gonna be the one side of the bag, and then I press on it so it ends, and then I press 110 this direction, and then I have this side. This side is gonna be this side, a side of my bag, and this is the side where I can just play with the pattern, because but we're gonna continue the bag before we do so. So firstly I selected my curves, and then I offset, and I told it I want a frame out, a 5 millimeter frame. And then I have my frame, my inner frame. Inner frame is gonna give me, this is, imagine this is rigid. And then here I'll have my pattern, whatever I want, for example, hexagons. I want, later on, I want to do this parametric shapes like that I have here. So you can have these grasshopper cool parametric patterns that you can always draw happen here. And so maybe for this time I want some sort of a polygon, hexagon, specify the first. Let's say I want, and I want, for example, pattern wrong. So I press array. I tell Rhino I want 5 in the X direction, enter. And only 3 in the Y direction, and only 1 in the Z direction. I press on the starting point, and I start specifying how I want the distances I want. For example, I want it like this. Then I press enter. And now I have a pattern, more or less. That's the basic, easy way of having a pattern. This can go on. What I did in the exercise was just some sort of squares. Then this was arrayed. I was like, I needed, for example, let's say 6, 3, and 1 in the, yeah. Then if you don't want to offset, you can also start your rectangle. This is gonna be your base. So let's say more or less gonna be like, if you want the bag to be wider and you want to put more stuff into it, of course this has to be wide. Otherwise this can be moderate to fit into a smaller printer, let's say. We're gonna press enter, and this time you can just move it 1 millimeter, and you have this gap, which gonna create the flexibility to fold. And then the other side, if you want the other side to be exactly the same, what I did was basically I just want this exact side as my other side of the bag. So what I did, I just selected the side, and I'm like, mirror, and I mirrored it from the midpoint of the base to the other midpoint, and then I have it mirrored. And then also the handle, more or less. So let's say I want a square handle for now, but you can, I just pressed offset and I told it 5 milli. And then I want the same handle mirror from the base, because my base is exactly in the center. And then I have it on the other side. There I have it. And now I want the sides. So this is, as you see here, you just gotta make sure that this and this are more or less the same size. So you do here another, this is gonna be like your smaller side of this. Gotta make sure it's actually the size of the base, one of the sides, so it fits. And then you can specify the height of it, but for this midpoint, we just need it for, let's say, to fold and to glue, just so we don't need a lot. And it might be cool to have. can just move it 1 milli. And of course, you're gonna mirror it this time from the mat over here. And you have it on the other side. So this way you're gonna flip the sides, but you need also more distance from here. And actually, there are different patterns of doing this. You can just do this side, but with this length entirely, instead of doing just three. You can do just one and cut it, but then you have to place glue here and here to have the bag. If you want to just glue on the surface, then you want to make another, then I have it. Then I have more or less my clutch. Later on, for example, I say, no, you know what, I don't like a square handle. I want to try some sort of a curvy handle, or I just know this is gonna be my handle, so I can always modify it whatever shape I want. And also, as we said, like this pattern later on, I want to do it with Grasshopper. There had been a lot of patterns I did, so I can show you. For example, this was later on created with Grasshopper. You can always play around, but you just have to know how to start. So you can see here, this was with the Grasshopper. I was like, I want this some sort of organic shape. I don't want just a regular pattern. So I was exploring how to have these bubbly shapes all around. So we're gonna go back to this. And now I have my curves. Of course, you can keep them or you can just copy it. Go here. This is where you are with your files that I've sent you. So now I need a surface because of course I want it 3D printed. I can select this and I tell Rhino I want surface from planar curves. And I'm like, yes. But you can see more or less, for example, here, it's selected this entirely as my surface. I don't want this. So for this surface, I'm gonna delete. I'm gonna do it one by one. So I tell Rhino I want this, and then I want a surface here. Because what I actually need from a surface, I want this frame. This is gonna be my bag frame. But this, I want hollow. I don't want the surface here. So you have to just um, have a deeper imagination where you want your surfaces and where you don't want them. And same goes here. I select this and I tell Rhino I want planar, I want surface from planar curves, and then I have the frame. And then I want these to be printed also. You have to imagine wherever you create a surface, it's wherever you're gonna extrude. So it's wherever you're gonna have the material 3D printed. Otherwise, it's gonna be just. So this also I want to have it. Whatever was the geometry, just surface from planar curves, and then you have surfaces all over. We're gonna do the same for that side. So you can see the difference here. Here it created an entire surface, but actually I want the handle as a surface, and here I want it hollow. Here it's not hollow from the inside. The best way to view it is on the perspective is the best way to solve it. You can see here, it's entirely solid. Everything is solid, the entire square. But I actually want just the frame, what's gonna be like solid and printed, and the pattern inside. Also here, I just want the frame. So not like this. For this surface, we're gonna delete because it did a boolean. It collected it and then it did the surface. That's not what I want. So I select these and I'm like, now it's correct. Same goes here. I'm gonna delete this surface. I'll like the other one. I'm gonna select this. If you want to select several stuff, you just press shift and you just select it at once all of my curves. And again, then select on here again, select this. You can also play with the view if you would like to see what's hollow, what's not. You just press render or shade it so I can see where my surface is at and where it's not a surface. It's just a curve. So what's left to have a surface is these, and then we're more or less done. But now these surfaces have no thickness, so they cannot be 3D printed, as we all know. just plain. And we want some height to 3D print, right? So now we're gonna extrude the surfaces. We're gonna select our surfaces and we're like extrude surface. And we're like, we put on here we want. Here it tells you specify the height. So that's what the height you want. I know I want to print, for example, 2 layers only because one underneath the fabric, one then pose with the fabric and then print one on it. Or maybe I want for, it depends on the slicing software, how you put the layer height. For example, if you want 0.2, then if you have your height is like 0.8, then you're printing two layers underneath fabric and 2 layers. If you divide 8 by 0.2, then you have 2 layers underneath, 2 layers above. But I did it in this case. 0.8 and enter. Oh, one thing before we're gonna repeat it again, because in extrude surfaces, you can specify if you want both direction. I'm like, no, because I want to have it from one. Solid, yes, for sure, solid, yes. Otherwise, no. Your mesh or your geometry is gonna be open and not watertight, so it cannot be 3D printed. So you're like, yes, I want it solid. And then again, and now I have thickness for my material, and this is gonna be the thickness I'm printing on. Now we're ready to export this. What you do is you select it, and you're like file, export STL, file, export STL, and here you tell it STL you want it in the format STL. I'm sure you're familiar with exporting stuff for the 3D printer, and you name it whatever. But I have it already, so I'm not gonna save it. And then we open the slicer. I'll do it again in front of you. We add it. So here we can try this, and there we have it. Here you can specify the layer height. So I put it 0.2, and I know I'm printing with PLA, so I know the temperature is more or less 205. Because I'm gonna 3D print on fabric, and I know I don't need like support because I'm sure it's just a simple geometry that you don't need a lot of parameters involved into it while slicing for this. Sometimes I print organic geometries where I truly need to dig into the settings because otherwise it's gonna get so messy because maybe the printer is printing too fast and the geometry is too complicated, so start just doing this spaghetti for you. So you have to, it depends on the geometry, but for such a very simple geometry, it's very easy. And then you slide, and then you have you just export your recode, you put it on the USB, and if everyone is here and if everyone having the printer, you can take this G code right now and just place it directly on the with the USB, and then you can let it run. Make sure you have your PLA. I need to stop screen, or I can actually here. So you can do like me. You can 3D start printing the first layer, and then we're gonna pose. You put your tooth fabric with clips or magnets, and then you're gonna resume the print to have it. So you can start doing so. And then we're gonna be able to take it out of the 3D printer and cut the excess fabric and fold it immediately, and then we're done. So it takes 40 minutes to print, which would finish within the workshop timing. Now you have the file, now you have the procedure, and you have the you have the PDF guide. You can follow it. I guess we're almost